creepy horror stories.
Ethan awoke with a gasp, his chest rising and falling in rapid succession. Sweat clung to his skin, his breath sharp and uneven as his eyes darted around the familiar darkness of his bedroom. His heart pounded against his ribs like a war drum. It was the nightmare again. The same decaying mansion. The same whispering wind rattling broken windows. The same sense of something unseen waiting, watching. He ran a trembling hand over his face, trying to steady himself. Why was this happening again? Later that evening, after a grueling shift at work, Ethan stepped into his apartment and dropped onto the couch, exhausted. His phone buzzed the moment he sat down. A message from Stephanie. "We need to talk. Meet me at 9 p.m. The old mansion. Don't come alone." His brows furrowed. What old mansion? Before he could type a response, another message arrived, a picture of the mansion from his nightmares. His throat tightened. The same crumbling walls. The same towering, gnarled trees. The same sense of foreboding he had felt every night in his dreams. He hesitated, then responded. "Okay. I'll see you then." A cold shiver passed through him. Whatever was happening, he needed answers. That night, the dream returned, but this time, something had changed. In the broken windows of the mansion stood three spectral figures. Their hollow eyes bore into him, their translucent forms shifting with an unnatural stillness. One glowed pale blue. One bled red like fresh wounds. One pulsed with a sickly green hue. They raised their hands, pointing directly at him. Ethan woke with a strangled cry. For the first time since the nightmares began, he understood one thing. This wasn't just a dream. By the time Ethan arrived at the mansion, Mark and Stephanie were already waiting by the rusted front gate. Stephanie stood rigid, arms crossed, chewing her lip. Mark, ever the skeptic, huffed impatiently. "All right, we're here. Can we get this over with?" Stephanie's gaze lingered on the house. "You didn't feel anything on the way here?" Ethan shifted. "Feel what?" She hesitated before shaking her head. "Never mind." Ignoring the growing sense of unease, she pushed open the creaking gate and strode toward the entrance. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. The wooden floor groaned under their footsteps, the scent of mildew seeping into their lungs. Faint whispers echoed through the halls, though none of them spoke. Stephanie led them deeper into the house, stopping at an aged wooden door. "The basement," she murmured. Mark tried the doorknob. It wouldn't budge. Stephanie wordlessly retrieved an old iron key from her pocket and slid it into the lock. With a loud click, the door groaned open, revealing a staircase vanishing into darkness. A faint draft carried the scent of damp stone and something else. Something ancient. A shudder ran down Ethan's spine. This was where his nightmares had led him. At the bottom of the stairs, the basement stretched out before them, a cavernous room lined with stone walls and a floor littered with dust and broken glass. At the center stood an enormous mirror, its frame blackened with age. "This is why I brought you here," Stephanie said. Ethan stepped closer. "What am I supposed to be looking at?" Instead of answering, Stephanie reached out and pressed her hand against the glass. Her fingers passed through. Ethan stumbled back. "What the?" Stephanie pulled her arm out, holding something in her grasp, a book, old and bound in cracked leather. Without hesitation, she handed it to Ethan. He hesitated before flipping through the pages. His breath caught in his throat. The ghosts from his nightmare were drawn on one of the pages, their haunting forms identical to what he had seen. How did you know?" His voice was barely a whisper. Stephanie met his gaze. "Because it's not just you, Ethan. The three of us," she motioned between them. "We were chosen." Ethan's hands tightened around the book. "Chosen? What the hell does that mean?" Stephanie's face was unreadable. The ghosts in your dreams, they're not just apparitions. They're our ancestors. You are cursed. Mark is bound. And I am fated. Mark scoffed. And what, we're just supposed to accept this nonsense? Stephanie's voice turned cold. If we refuse, everyone in our bloodlines will die. The house always takes 3. Ethan's stomach twisted. Takes, for what? Stephanie swallowed. I don't know. Mark shook his head. Screw this. I'm leaving. He turned to go, but before he could take another step, the mirror pulsed. A powerful force yanked them forward, dragging them into its swirling vortex. Ethan barely had time to scream before the world dissolved around him. They awoke on an endless checkered floor stretching into eternity. There were no walls, no ceiling, only a vast, consuming void. Their clothes had changed. Ethan's were pale blue. Mark's, blood red. Stephanie's, a sickly green. A voice echoed from the abyss. You have finally arrived. From above, a figure descended. A being with 6 wings, half as dark as night, half as bright as heaven's fire. 6 arms. 6 eyes. It landed before them, a towering force of presence and power. Ethan's breath hitched. What, are you? I am the house, it rumbled. The keeper of the cycle. The devourer of the unchosen. Mark clenched his fists. What do you want from us? The being unfurled its wings. One of you must willingly sacrifice yourself to end the curse. If no one chooses, the house will take all 3 of you. Ethan's grip on the book tightened. His eyes scanned the pages frantically, until he found it. The cursed may break the cycle by shattering the mirror, but only if the bound and the fated stand beside them. His pulse raced. The mirror. We have to destroy it. The entity loomed closer. You defy the house. Ethan locked eyes with Stephanie and Mark. Together. Stephanie nodded. Mark exhaled, then gave a firm nod. The book in Ethan's hands ignited in blue fire. The void trembled. The house screamed. And suddenly, they were back in the basement. The mirror stood before them, its surface rippling like water. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed a rusted pipe and swung. The glass shattered into 1,000 shards. A deafening wail echoed as the mansion quaked around them. Run! Stephanie yelled. They bolted for the exit as the house crumbled. The moment they crossed the threshold, silence fell. Mark gasped for breath. Did we do it? Stephanie turned back. The mansion stood eerily still, its once haunted windows empty. Ethan exhaled. The weight in his chest was gone. For the first time in a long time, the night was quiet. The end, he whispered. And this time, he knew it truly was.